Oh, I know that sound. It's time for the Beer and News Report. Hi, and welcome to the Beer and News Report. Cheers. The Ukraine War. The United States has given a lot of money and weapons to them, so why should we continue to do that? How does the United States benefit from supporting the Ukraine War? Well, that's going to be the discussion of today's show. Just a heads up, I'm not going to talk about how this is hurting the civilian lives there, or the pain that people are going through, or the death that happens during war. I'm just going to cut it down to the bare minimum and treat the Ukraine war like a laboratory. So grab a beer and maybe some of those plastic green army men or a Nerf rocket launcher, and let's start the show. Cheers. Well, first things first, and I shouldn't even have to say this, is that Russia has always been an enemy of us. It's always been a thorn in our side. They always vote against us in the UN. They support the other side when we go to war, such as Vietnam or more recently Afghanistan. So, that's the first point. Russia is not our friend. Secondly, one of the benefits of supporting the Ukraine war is that it allows the United States to get rid of some of their old weapons. For instance, in 2008, the Convention on Cluster Munitions prohibits the use, production, stockpiling, and transfer of cluster munitions and requires states to ensure that they no longer claim future victims, right? And although the United States isn't a signatory on this convention, it had tons of cluster bombs that it was supposed to dispose of, okay? So they looked at this war and they said, hey, wait a minute, the Russians are using cluster bombs. Why don't we give our cluster bombs to the Ukraine and they can use them on Russia, right? So even though we weren't a signatory, we kind of fell into compliance with the Convention on Cluster Munitions because we don't have any more cluster munitions. It's an old saying, you're killing two birds with one stone, right? Cheers. Another benefit of supporting the Ukraine war is that we get to battlefield test our weapon systems against Russia's weapon systems. I know that we test them through war games, but using it in an actual war is way better. It was thought that the Russian tanks would do a German-style blitzkrieg and overwhelm the Ukrainian forces. The reason being that in 2014, Russia took Crimea in like a day with no resistance. The Russians loved Putin for that. He got so many bonus points. So he must have figured in his head, well, if the rest of the country would fall just as fast as Crimea fell, we'll just get our tanks to run over them. But what actually happened is the Russians sent in their tanks, but due to logistical errors, they ran out of gas. This ended their blitzkrieg, and it got to the point where the soldiers were running out of food, so they just abandoned their tanks and went back to the homeland. And this error allowed the Ukrainian army to take back some of the land that Russia invaded, and it also gave them time for the US, the EU, and other countries to send support to the Ukraine. So it's amazing how one little error can blow up in your face, right? Cheers. As I said in the beginning, our military assumed Russia would attack with the multitude of tanks that they have. So we had to send to the Ukraine weapon systems that were anti-tank. And these were the Javelins, the NLAWs, the TOW missiles. Also, because Russia had way more aircraft than the Ukraine, the U.S. sent in anti-aircraft weapons like the FIM-92 Stinger, the MIM-23 Hawk, and the AN/TWQ-1 Avengers. These weapon systems proved more than capable of taking out Russia's tanks, helicopters, and fighters. In fact, these weapons were so good, and the Ukraine was using so much of them, that they were using them faster than we could produce them. So we had to switch. And the switchover was howitzers. And in the beginning, the Ukraine is using about 3,000 rounds a day. And not only was this faster than we could produce rounds, but the howitzers itself were wearing out and breaking down, and the Ukraine didn't have parts to repair it. So this is where the US, us, we learned that, hey, maybe we're not fully prepared to do a conventional war as we thought we were. That's an important point. Cheers. Now, we also sent in tanks, and we started with our old T-72B tanks, but more recently, we sent in the M1A1 Abrams tank, but that takes about 22 weeks to learn how to use it, so we're just seeing how it's being used right now. They just barely got through training, and they're using it now. But one big surprise that we did find out was how effective the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle is. Now here's a video of two Bradley tanks taking on a Russian T-90 tank. Check this out. As you can see, the Bradley has powerful weapons, outstanding optics, and excellent cross-country ability, which allows the Ukrainian army to move right up into the Russian tanks and fire at them upon will. Now, can you imagine being inside that Russian tank and hearing the loud pummeling of the bullets from the Bradley? I mean, it must be like having your head inside a big bell and they're hitting it with a sledgehammer. That's got to drive you insane. Cheers. Now we're starting to get into more sophisticated equipment like the HIMARS. And HIMARS stands for High Mobility Artillery Rocket Systems. HIMARS is a missile launcher mounted on a 5-ton truck which can fire 6 guided missiles in quick succession. The missiles supplied to the Ukraine have a range of about 50 miles or 80 kilometers, which is over twice the range of a howitzer gun. HIMARS are way more mobile than howitzers, so they are able to get out of the way when you fire the weapon. And that's preferred because once you fire any type of artillery, the opponent sees it, tracks it, and then fires back from where it came from. So it's important that you get the heck out of there once you shoot off your artillery, right? Yeah, cheers. Finally, there are the drones. The U.S. has sent the Ukraine the Switchblade type of drones, both the 300 and 600 series, and the drones are proving to be the most capable weapon in this war. Even Russia is buying drones from Iran. These are the Shahed drones, and Russia has bought over 6,000 and has sent around 1,000 into the Ukraine. Russia has acquired the rights to build these Shahed drones in their factory in Tatarstan, that's in eastern Russia. So these drones are not going away anytime soon. You might get a kick out of this. Australia is also sending in some cheap cardboard-like drones that are working out really well. These drones are made by Corvo and they're called Precision Payload Delivery Systems, or PPDS. And the nickname is the Origami of Death. They're sending them in at about 100 a month. And since they're made from cardboard-like material, they can't be detected by radar. They're launched from like a slingshot launcher, or you just throw them from your hand. So they're easy to build and launch, and you can even do these in the field. Now, these drones have proven to get around the Russian defenses and even attack helicopters and jets because you can't see them. These drones fly at about 36 miles an hour, right? So they're not going that fast. I know this sounds impossible, but the Ukrainians are doing it. Cheers. So let's recap what we've learned. Russia isn't the military force that we thought it was. 2, when it comes to conventional wars, our manufacturing isn't quite up to speed. 3, artillery is the key in a war, whether that comes from howitzers or HIMARS. 4, drones don't have to be expensive. Even slow, cheap cardboard drones can be effective. Last but not least, the cohesion with NATO allies is stronger than ever. Supporting a country that's been attacked by an aggressor is bringing our other nations together more than we thought NATO could. It's at a point where we thought NATO was going down the drain. Most NATO countries have ramped up their military weapons spending so that they're in compliance with the 2% GDP that U.S. has asked for. There's a strategic importance to having a strong and stable NATO alliance. I think we all can agree to that. Cheers. Now, you may have heard that there's no way the Ukraine can win this war because it's a war of attrition, and Russia has a population of about 150 million, and Ukraine's population about 40 million. So Russia's bound to win. It's just a matter of numbers. But what if our goal isn't to have Ukraine win the war, but destroy Russia's economy, right? We've put in sanctions on Russia, but sanctions, just like in any other country, it takes time for them to have an effect. So the longer this war goes on, the further behind Russia will become compared to the rest of the world. And then you have to take into the effects of a low birth rate and increased death due to war. This will make their demographics look like an hourglass. And that means that they're decimating their workforce at a time when there's not enough babies to replace them. Russia as a manufacturing country could become almost insignificant, which is ironic because Russia has more natural resources than any other country. Yeah, cheers. Well, you can see my beer's almost empty. That means we're at the end of the show. If you want to contact me, I can reach you at this email address. Today, I'm drinking, it's too hard to see, but it's called Palace of Steinart's Beer, and it's made by Bear Bottle Brewing. And I found out that this is made in the Palace of Steinart's in San Francisco. I didn't even know there was a brewery there. Anyways, it's a German-style lager. It's pretty good. It kind of tastes a little bit like Heineken. I don't know if you like Heineken or not, but it's around that kind of taste. I think you should give it a try. Anyways, I hope you had a good time watching the show, and please click that like button if you did. Of course, if you want to get notified of new shows, you click that subscribe button and then the little bell icon next to it, and this will let you know when I produce a new show. Until then, keep your beer cold and your interests hot. Cheers.